Hey everyone, Perry Power here. I'm an actor, I'm a storyteller, I'm an entrepreneur, and I am a charity co-founder. Now, when it comes to my story, it kind of starts when I was 4 years old. My mother, who I love to death, we're great friends now, she's hilarious. That's where I get my personality from. Uh, but back when I was 4 years old, she had to do something for herself, and she had to leave, you know? And she left, and it was just me and my dad, and I'd only see her once or twice a year for a few years. But it was just me and my dad, and he raised me. My stepmom came into the picture a few years later after this, but it was just me and him, and it was a tough time. It really was growing up with a man. My dad was a Cockney geezer. He's from East London, right? And, he's an odd man, right? You're masculine of men, uh, and I couldn't mess up around him because he'd make me know about it, and it was difficult, very difficult to be raised in that environment, because I used him as kind of like an example of what being a man should be, which, as we discover in my story, there's a lot of twists and turns when it comes to that. Now, when I was 10 years old, I was sexually abused by my step granddad. Now, this happened for over a year. Truth is, I don't actually know how long it went on for. I don't remember when it started. And I know this is very common for survivors within a family environment, especially if they've been abused by a family member for God knows how long, or a babysitter that they've known for many, many years. They tend to don't know when it started. Not all the time, but a lot of times they don't know when it started. I'm one of them. I have no idea when it started because I didn't know it was wrong, right? The whole time he groomed me. He was the he was my hero growing up. He was my hero. So I have no idea when it started, but I do remember when it ended because he would abuse me a lot of times when there was someone else in the room. And my stepmom caught it happening one time and she put a stop to it. She took me out, she took me home, she told my dad, and my dad then confronted me in quite a confrontational way. And he asked me what happened, and he told me that it was wrong, and he told me that I'm never going to go around there again. And I'm also not allowed to speak about it. I'm not allowed to go to school and tell my friends. I'm not allowed to tell my mum. I need to keep this at home between the four walls of the house. Right? Right there, that's where the trauma started because that's where the silence started. Okay. It lasted for about 12 years living in silence. But I grew up now becoming a teenager, becoming a man in today's society as the son of my father. And when I was 19, I left home. I just need to escape the hold that my dad had over me. So I go traveling. I went to Australia and I become a party guy. I'm wearing masks to essentially hide the boy that was abused. Now, when I was 22 years old, so this was quite a considerable amount of time after I come back, I'd moved in with my girlfriend at the time. And my dad, his drinking got a lot worse. He always had a drinking problem. I would grow up filling the vodka bottles with water and put it back in the cupboard so my mum wouldn't notice any difference, right? That was, happening a lot. But his drinking got worse and worse and worse. And when I moved in with my girlfriend, he came round one time, pissed as a fart. And he just told me that he had an argument with my stepmom, which was common then. And he left, and I would never would have asked this to his face, but I sent him a text. And I said, Dad, why are you drinking so much? And he comes back and all he says was to fight away the demons. That was it. No idea what he meant by that. Right? No idea. Now later on, that day, he sends me a text and he says that he's got a pain in his stomach and I didn't respond back to it. And then sometime later I did, but he didn't respond back to me. Then I get two pictures in the evening from my brother. One of an ambulance van, one of my dad lying on a bed at the house with a paramedic standing next to him. Now, by that point, we're talking June 2017. January 2017, he just become a diabetic. Now, prior to that, he had high blood pressure. So he was on high blood pressure tablets and then becomes a diabetic. Then June 2017, he's got a pain and paramedics basically said that his blood levels were off. So they need to take him down to the hospital to even him out. So they're putting him back in the van, drive down to the hospital. But unfortunately, he didn't make it to the hospital and he had a heart attack and he passed away. And he was 48 years old. Now, what ended up happening was after this, about 6 or so-ish months later, I ended up seeing a video on YouTube of Lewis Howes being interviewed by Ellen DeGeneres, and she asked him why he had written this book called The Mask of Masculinity. And he said because he was abused as a kid and he grew up wearing masks. And the way that he said that, he used words that made me realize exactly what I had been doing. Right? He put it into context for me. And I made a decision in that moment, all right, what can I, now that I'm aware of this problem, what can I do right now to make a change? And that for me was, oh shit, I need to tell my girlfriend. I need to tell Abby when she comes home. Shitting bricks, right? But like, and I wait for her to come home. We go out for a walk with my dog. And I tell her about being abused. Now, I don't even remember a single word that I said, but I remember how I felt, which is feeling like I was just stark bollock naked and, you know, in the middle of central London or in the middle of Times Square and everyone's just staring at me, right? But that's vulnerability, as Brene Brown says. And, but I don't remember a single word that I said. But then what ended up happening was from then, a few months later, I go to a business mastermind event and it was me and 6 or 7 other fitness trainers. And because at the time I had a fitness business, and they go around a room to just like introduce yourselves, tell us why you're here, what your fitness business is about, and what you're hoping to achieve. Comes around to me, I'm lost. I don't think I talked anything about the business, or maybe I did, but what I primarily spoke about was being abused. But again, I don't remember what I said, but I remember how I felt, and it's just, you know, it's just crazy. And then what ended up happening was driving home from that event. I was like, right. I feel more, my comfort zone has been expanded and I'm feeling more like I want to, you know, I just want to get this off my chest, but I don't want to tell every Tom, Dick and Harry. I want to say it once and it's just out there. Now, I was, like I am now, working on social media pretty much all the time. So in my head, I was like, right, I'm going to do a video. I'm just going to put it on Facebook. In my head, I'm like, okay, cool. You're going to do that when you get home. You know, get home and do it. Another voice. I don't think you will, mate. I don't think you will. Because you're going to get home. Abby's going to ask you how the event was. You're going to update her, and then boom, you're back in your comfort zone. Then you'll tell yourself a reason as to why you shouldn't speak out again. So I pulled my car over, and what you see right here is a screenshot from the video. And it was me on a global scale breaking my silence. Now, what ended up happening from that video is I ended up going around to my back home to my stepmom's house. And she told me that she'd watched the video, and she said that I didn't know that you was abusing more than that one time, right? When I caught it happening, I thought that was just it. And that made me realize that even in those moments, I didn't tell them that my step granddad had done more to me than that very instant. And then I go around to my auntie's house, my dad's sister, and she then tells me that I wasn't the only one in the family who had been abused by my step granddad. There was 3 others too, and my dad was one of them. And that right there made me realize that my dad had lived and died in silence. That's why he made me be quiet. That's why he hit the bottle. That is why he had a heart attack at the age of 48. Because of the silence that he was drowning in, because of the demons that he was struggling to fight. And, you know, that right there essentially made me, gave me purpose to be like, you know what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to help survivors speak out. I'm going to go out there and help men not go down the same road that my dad went down. So I start that mission and I start that sort of journey of purpose. And cutting the story short, I ended up moving into a house on my own. I cut ties with the fitness business because I grew misaligned to it because it had nothing to do with my story. And I'm literally sleeping on the floor in the house with my dog, just me and her, sharing halving my dinners with her, debt collectors at the door, everything. It really was the darkest year of my life. And what, you know, like here, I end up, hey, life of luxury. I end up upgrading from the floor to a sofa bed. I managed to get the sofa bed for like, I think 70 quid from a charity shop. And then I slept on there. And as you can tell, they've got a Christmas tree in the corner. I use a fruit box as a table. But, you know, I had a roof over my head and I had a Mara. And at the time, that was all that mattered, you know. But this is a screenshot from a video that I took. Basically saying that I was this close from ending it. And it's a tough one because I feel like some of the, you know, the universe faith in who I can become, knowing that it's just challenges of life is thrown my way, and also knowing that if I was going to drive my car into a wall and end it all, who's going to look after tomorrow? So it's an accumulation of a lot of things why I didn't go through with it. But what ended up happening was on Netflix, I ended up watching a documentary, Jeffrey Epstein, and I was 2 or 3 episodes into it, and I ended up getting the idea of writing a book, right? Because she's talking about living in silence and she can't speak out because of this powerful guy. And that gave me the idea, is like, you know what I need to do right now is I just need to write my story. That's it. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I just feel like, the universe is telling me right now that this is what I need to do. So I then crack on with that. I actually wrote it in 30 days, but didn't publish it. I kept it in my Google Drive, right? I was like, right, that's it. And then Amara, my dog, her health just rapidly declined. And, I've been through abuse, I've been through breakups, I've been through my dad. But this, if you're a dog parent and you're watching this, woo, you're gonna know what I'm how I'm feeling right now, and especially back then. But it's the darkest day of my entire life, letting her go, and 4.5 years old. But yeah, and what I ended up having to do was I ended up leaving the house, that one, because I couldn't stay any longer. I went back to the house, and I woke up the next day in a dog bed. I was like, right, if I stay here for 24 more hours, I won't be alive in 24 more hours. So I ended up leaving. Ended up sleeping on my auntie's couch for 4 months, and ended up moving into for the first time ever shared a house with like roommates. And I just woke up one day and I just had this moment. My life is full of fuck it moments, right? Because it helps me just, but you know what, fuck it, do it. Why not? What am I waiting for? Not tomorrow, now, right now, today. And I woke up like, Perry, get this book out. Because the fears that you have right now getting a book out was the same fears that you had a year ago, because this is now a year ahead of me writing the book. And if you wait for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, it's going to be the same fears again. So you're just going to go onto Canva, create a book cover, use Grammarly, Google extension to sort out the wordings, just watch a few YouTube videos to publish it, self-publish it through Amazon KDP, and that's it. Right? And then boom, I end up publishing it, and I end up getting into the media, and it was just a snowball from there. Like that book, launching that book has got me to where I am today. Get into First Voice over here. This is my article in the First Voice magazine. Getting into a news article here, into the Sun, front cover of the Surrey Advertiser. I did a TEDx talk, front cover of Surrey Live. Lots of amazing things happen. And then this one, very interestingly, with Spotlight, it's a film. If you haven't seen it, all of you should have seen it. But I'm going to assume most of you have seen it. And at the end of the movie, they do a lot of listings around the world of reportings of child molestation. Anyway, I end up finding out from going out into the press that my step-granddad's family reached out to me, ended up meeting up with them, found out that he abused them all too. And my step-granddad he's raised in Ireland, and you probably know where this is going, went to a called St. Joseph's Industrial Estate. It's a school, boarding school, for kids, like both his parents died, and that's why he went in there with his brother. And anyway, getting abused and raped and everything you can possibly imagine by the priests there. And that was very an interesting thing that I found out. And what ended up happening was I decided to just go to town and go all in on using my platform, using my message to reach survivors out there, and just to sort of get my message out there. And my audience has blown up to 149,000 on TikTok, over 200,000 on Facebook, over 60,000 on Instagram. And the engagement and people respond. I don't talk about comedies. I don't do sketches. I don't do dances. I talk about stories. I talk about abuse. I don't just talk about abuse, but a lot of what I do is talk about abuse, and I share other stories of abuse. But it's mainly from the angle of thriving. It's about achieving. It's about creating a life that you want to live. It's about not living a life under a label that has kind of been slapped onto you. And that's pretty much what I do. I've got a Facebook group called the Power Tribe, which is got over 4,700 survivors in there. Sharing their stories is a real safe space for people to just not feel alone anymore, really. That's what that is. And we can see here, one of the main things is about everyone is on social media, especially you boys growing up, teenagers, young men, older men. They're all on social media. They're consuming content, especially videos. And that gave me the idea of, okay, let me put stories that they could relate to with an inspiring, powerful message at the end wrapped up into it to make them not feel alone, to make them feel inspired, and to show them a path of what they can go down that is different from the path that they're currently on, because that's not the only way. They're not alone. They're not the only one that was raped by their uncle. They're not the only one that was abused by their grandma, right? There's plenty of others too. And as you can tell by the views on these videos, it's resonating with a lot of people, you know? I then launched a charity with a friend of mine, Juliet, who grew up in the foster care system in America, and she was actually raised in a satanic cult as a foster care house. And we launched a charity called We Rescue Kids, which is essentially we get donations in, we pay for child licensed therapists to put child survivors through a mental health care program. It's essentially what we do. We match them both up. And then we have, I'm on the board of We Together, which is a UK-based charity where essentially what we're doing is we're building out a platform that allows survivors and victims to anonymously self-report what they went through and what happened to them. And it goes into this platform, into this database, and then using AI technology, if there's similarities in people's stories, which there will be a lot of times, creates a cluster which then gets sent to the police to then start an investigation. Because no longer is it one voice, but it's the voice of many. It's a long phase, but this is my North Star. This is my dream, which is powerful pictures. And, I'm an actor and, have been since I was a kid. And, I believe I'm here to tell stories through video reels, stories in Hollywood, stories in the British film industry, in Bollywood, everything that inspires people and, creates change. And my thing is powerful pictures. I'm known for telling true story films. So, that's the goal. And that's what I'm in the beginning stages of building there. And then we've also got, which has taken up a lot of my focus at the moment, which I'm so grateful for, which is powerful books. And essentially with powerful books, what we do is we work with trauma survivors to help them turn their story into a book. And that process right there acts almost as if it's its own therapy. It's basically a self-healing, very therapeutic, very transformative journey, which brings the survivors that we work with a lot of healing. And then at the end, if they wish to, they can publish their book to the world. But if they don't want to, they don't have to do that. Nobody needs to know about it. Their abuser doesn't need to know about it. Their family don't need to know about it. It can just be for them. All right. Now we do this through a very specific structure called the Powerful Story Framework. And essentially what we do is we forget about the book that they want to write. We first unravel the story that they've lived so far. We see where the dots connect, and then we find their authentic voice. Then next, we figure out what their message is. What's the message that's been born out of their story, right? What's the message that's gotten into where they are today? How can we communicate that in a clear and concise way? And then we figure out what the structure is for the book. So how's the book going to come across? Is it an autobiography? Is it a guide? Is it a blend? Is it a research study? What is it? How's it going to come across? What's it going to deliver? And then what's all the chapters to the book? So then when they start writing, because a lot of times when someone just want to write a story, they start writing, then boom, they hit a brick wall. Where do I go from here? Do I talk about this experience? Or I talk about that experience? Do I include names or not include names? I don't want this to be a sob story. My book is too long my story is too long for one book. It needs to be 5 books. My story is too short for a book. It's going to be 30 pages. It's a pamphlet, And essentially what this does is it just, boom, just wipes all of that. Just gets rid of all those questions, okay? Because we can't get answers to those questions before we start writing. It just essentially creates resistance and overwhelm. Now I'm very aware the next couple of slides is going to be of women. I'm very aware of that. But I'm going to share something in a second about the men. But, if a woman can transform, a man can too. This is Deborah. She turned her story into a book, completely inspiring, completely transformational. We've got Emma, who basically been wanting to write a book for an entire life, and she just didn't follow through with it. But she did. She joined the community. She's actually now a book editor, and she's our client success manager. So she supports people's journeys. So our team, we're run by survivors for survivors, right? And we've also got, sorry, that should not say Emma. That should say Ali. So let's forget about the Emma, right? It is Ali. Ali's amazing. She's just, she wrote her book, and she was abused by her father. And she now actually has signed her first 2 book events in local bookstores, which she has towards the end of the year, which is amazing. And then we have also, God, I've done it again. It's not Emma, it's Bonnie. Forgive me for these little details. This is why I have people to help me, right? For the small details. I'm a big vision man. I struggle with small details. Anyway, not Emma, it's Bonnie. Now, Bonnie is an amazing woman. Again, she was abused by her father. And she said that writing her book has brought her more healing than 10 years worth of counseling. 10 years. And this happens to a lot of people. You know, a lot of people come into a program, have had therapy, they've had counseling, and whilst it's not a competition, a lot of times they have therapy that like really, really nicely gels with the writing. But for some people, just for whatever reason, the therapy or the counseling didn't help them, but writing their story brought them more transformation than they could have ever possibly imagined. And then, so we currently got, at the time of recording this, we've got 38 survivors in our program. 4 of them are men, right? So you best believe I'm working hard to try and increase that number. You know, we've got Scott there, we've got John there, we've got Glenn, and we have Rob that's joined. You know, we've got 4 at the moment, but again, even these 2 men here, lovely, inspiring men, are also saying about how much their lives are transforming in the process of writing their story. And that's essentially what we're building here, and that's what we're doing, you know. So what I'd like to say is that the journey that I've been on, it's kind of brought me to a point where I'm like, you know, no matter what stage you're at in life, there's always a meaning to it, which is why if you've got a story, you can turn it into a book. You know, it doesn't matter about where you've come from, right? But it's about owning the narrative of your story now to create the life that you want to live moving forward. Okay. Now, for me, I've taken away 2 big meanings so far. The first one is about breaking the silence. You have to break the silence to start that healing journey. But here's like one of my messages that I put out there into the world is, if you're living in silence, it's to not tell your partner, tell a parent, tell a therapist as the first time you break the silence, telling someone else, because you can't control their reaction. So if they reject you, if they pause for too long, if they say something that you didn't want to hear, that could send you back to living in silence for the rest of your life, because now you associate your truth with rejection. Okay? So instead, I say to people, break the silence to yourself first, as many different ways as possible, and then others. Tell someone else in step number 17, because now you're telling somebody from a place of power. You're not seeking validation from them, right? You're not seeking approval from them. You're telling them because it is, right? And breaking the silence to yourself can be writing a poem, could be writing a song, choreographing a dance piece. It could be, you know, going to clay molding and making a cup, because now you have a physical representation of your story. It could be writing a book, telling yourself in the mirror, just telling yourself so many times until you feel like you're owning that truth, you know? And then the next thing is essentially owning our story. Because if we don't own it, we can't change our story that we've lived, right? We must own our story, because if we don't own our story, then our story will own us. Be powerful.
Well, I would like to invite Nathan, Francesco, and Perry to join me for our panel discussion. Perfect. So our questions for today. So I will start with the first one. What are some trauma-informed, culturally sensitive approaches to engage diverse communities in conversation about human trafficking, child sexual abuse, violence, masculinity, healing, while acknowledging the unique social contexts? So let's begin with you, Perry.
Hey, so my thoughts on this is essentially doing what I already do, but at a grander scale, by different people or different types of abuse, different types of trauma, different types of societal backgrounds, because all of them will have their own unique perspective and their own lens of which they're seeing the world view. So I think about, you know, everyone is addicted to storytelling, right? We remember stories because of how they make us feel included, right? And they inspired us to create change. So I think that if more survivors can share their stories through a story format, then that will inspire other people and give them permission to not necessarily put their story out there on social media and for the whole world to know, but to help them feel included and to not feel alone, and to give them permission to share their story. And I feel like that at a grand scale covers a lot of parts in regards to societal backgrounds and giving people permission through their own lens.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Perry. And I've definitely learned that through the research itself, interviewing different nationalities, different ethnic groups, and you can definitely see that there are very different barriers that come up depending on what ethnicity that you come from. And instead of just going forward and disclosing some communities have that sense of bringing dishonor to the whole community or to the family, and that alone can stop them from disclosing. And it's very important to understand those sub barriers as well, just in those different communities, so we can create those safe spaces they don't just fit that one box, but really expand to anyone that really goes forward for help, or just to understand those that don't come forward to get help. Thank you very much. So let's go to our next question, and it's, what do you suggest to men and boys that are seeking help? Perry, would you like to start us off?
Sure. It's an interesting question because, as you can tell from my story, is that my dad never got that help, right? And so has many men out there not got that help. And obviously it's like the boys never got the help, and then they grow up and they become the men that still haven't got that help. And, you know, my dad went to AA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous, and but he stopped going to that. And I think a lot of times with men, I think that they, in one way, don't want to admit that they have a problem or admit that they've been through some type of abuse because of shame, right? Because of that act of vulnerability. But I think that the step before that, because all men know that they need help. We all know that we need help. Whether we go out and get that help that's a completely different ballgame. But I feel like if we can approach men and approach boys, because if someone outside of our family would have approached my dad and been like, hey, me too, right? That would have been a whole different sort of ball game for him, because now he doesn't feel alone anymore, right? So I feel like if we can get that, hey, me too, one man to another, one boy to another, one man to a boy, you know, and then I feel like then that there is the missing step before them then reaching out to help, right? Because now they're aware of the problem, they don't feel alone anymore. And they're like, okay, now I'm prepared to actually take that step and get some help. And I feel like that's the step that we need to do.
That's fantastic, Perry, and I definitely saw that in the research. No, thank you so much. And of course, we have to look at it that way as well, to make sure that we're looking at the situation in a more holistic manner. And when I was doing my research, I was able to get 40 male survivors to tell me what was helpful to them and what wasn't helpful to them in the master's thesis. And it was very interesting because they actually made kind of like a progression chart of, the very first thing was admitting that something had happened, and really kind of going through that, their own self-research, starting to really ask those questions to themselves and looking for more information. And then that's when the next step, which Perry had mentioned, it was just find one person to like open up to trust, to speak to, and then that can lead to community. And then that can lead to then actively getting help, going to someone that is trauma informed, that is specialized in the type of trauma that you need. And then furthermore, going after things that bring you joy again, and bring you that happiness, so that you can kind of start going into that thriving and not so much into just surviving. And so if anyone was interested in looking at that, Michelle has it in one of the handouts. It's the master's thesis, and that was created by survivors for survivors. But that leads me into the last question, which is, can you tell us about any toolkit items, books, programs, or initiatives that you would like to highlight? So let's start with you, Perry.
Sure. So we have the first one here, which is obviously my book, Breaking the Silence. And that's primarily because of part 3, which is essentially, which I covered already, is the whole notion of breaking the silence, right? But breaking the silence to yourself first in as many different ways as possible. So on step 17 or step 20, then when you're telling someone, it's coming from a place of power, right? You're not seeking validation, not seeking approval, because you've already given that to yourself. So that's definitely the first thing, which is breaking the silence. You know, and I feel like this is so powerful, which is what we do, which I talked about, which is, you know, the books from survivors themselves, right? Where they've written these books, where they've been abused by their dad, trafficked by their dad, abused by their dad, abused by kids at school, you know, and that's what helps people through a story format know that they're not alone. And in this one here, I want a quick plug here. This is specifically, it's called Secret Shame, and it's specifically for male survivors. and he's a psychologist, and he basically just tons and tons of research into the differences between male and female, how they respond to it, and societal pressure plugged into all of that. And then the last thing is obviously about writing a book or writing your story. Just a simple act of writing your story. You don't have to publish the book, but the simple act of writing your story, I think, is hugely, hugely powerful because it enables you to take ownership over your story, which is something as survivors we never had.
And thank you so much, Perry, for highlighting that, and thank you for sharing the program that you've created to guide survivors through this storytelling narrative, either, as you said, just for themselves, or if they wanted to share with the world, they have that chance too. And thank you so much for the massive change you're making in so many people's lives around the world.